Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the I.M.A.G.E Show, special edition, 98.3 The Vibe, Sunday morning show, TV podcast. For those of you who are joining us by satellite, we want to thank you for tuning in. For those of you joining us by YouTube, we want to tell you to get out there and continue to subscribe. We have now entered podcast number 7. That's right. This is podcast number 7. We've got some great guests with us. To my right here is the one and only attorney of the state of Iowa, Christina Brandstad. That's right. That's the former Governor Terry Brandstad's niece, now defense attorney, and she's one of the best. She's also an I.M.A.G.E sponsor, and we give her a lot of credit for everything that she does. To my left, we have Mr. Tony Dodd. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know Tony Dodd did 19 years, 9 months straight. He is now out as a free man. He's going to tell his story at some time, and I'm so glad he's going to be on the First Fridays I.M.A.G.E reentry program. And so to my left, we have, well, you all know who's over there. That's the original Ken Silver. And Ken was the guy that helped me find the I.M.A.G.E program. So here we are on the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a lot of people in here. I mean, this is great. We are practicing social distancing. We are going to get into a lot of great detailed stuff. Ken, I've been talking a lot. Why don't you just break us down? Tell us a little bit about what we went through, law enforcement, what we're going into, and the whole shebang.
Well, we've spent the last few weeks going over the components of the justice system. And we covered law enforcement pretty well. Now we're ready to move on to what we call the court system, and that includes the attorneys, the juries, and the judges. And before we get into that, I think we'll let Tony tell his story, because he's a prime example of what happens when the system goes wrong, and also a prime example of how our government officials can affect our justice or injustice system. And Tony, if you've got a minute, tell us what happened to you about how'd you end up with a life sentence anyway?
Drugs, cocaine.
You must have been a really bad dude to get a life sentence. Did you kill a bunch of people, or what happened?
No, see, that was my daughter thought at the time, though. She was a youngster, and 10, 11 years old, and she asked me, who did I kill? Well, she seen me on the internet, somehow on the computer, that I had a life sentence.
So you got a life sentence for
drugs.
For dealing, using, what?
Both, all in the same. So all that coexist with each other, and that's what happened. You know, it's part of life that I don't recommend for no one.
You must have been one of the biggest kingpins in the whole Midwest to get a life sentence, huh?
No, it wasn't that. It was the laws. I had priors,
terrible.
And they accumulated priors, what they call it.
Was this a 3-strike deal?
3-strike deal.
Okay.
Yes, sir, exactly what it was.
Is that still in effect, by the way, or not?
I believe it is, but I don't think they utilizing it as much, because I haven't been hearing a whole lot of cats going that, getting caught up in it. But instead, a lot of people getting out now with multiple life sentences. Just here recently. There's people where I was at got out.
Well, you were in the era where it was get hard on drugs type of thing, and give them the maximum sentence and so on.
Yes, I was.
That kind of changes as the wind changes in the government and politics and so on, doesn't it?
Made a big change.
I got a question. So, Tony, tell us a little bit about when you were actually sentenced to a life sentence for possession with intent to deliver crack cocaine. I mean, now this was a federal case, right?
Correct.
Okay, and what year was this?
2001.
2001. Take us back.
Well, I started off with the state, and the feds came in and indicted me from the state. And they used the evidence in my state to go to the feds, and I never understood that, how they had the authority to do that in our state. But it happened, and I got a life sentence.
Slow down a minute. How did you end up being a federal case? Do you have guns or?
No.
you sold to an FBI agent? What made it go from state to federal?
Well, feds, I believe they was watching me. They say way back in the mid-'80s, coming from Chicago to Iowa, and me and...
Well, you were guilty.
Yeah.
You came from Chicago.
Right,
You should never have been here to start with.
Correct.
Oh, especially back then. They was really hammering you guys
Yeah.
way back then. That's ridiculous. Now, so I would imagine it was the amount probably
Yeah.
of drugs that you
Yeah.
had. And so now we know that and Christina Brandstad is right here, one of Des Moines' top defense attorneys. And did you feel that if you would have had maybe a lawyer that you could have, if you had the money to pay for a top-notch lawyer, do you think that that would have got you out of the life sentence?
I truly believe that to be fact. And I even was told by certain officials that I shouldn't have been got the time I got. You know what I mean? And it happened. I mean, I was blinded by the law, because I mean, I don't know the law. But if I'd have had someone to represent me thoroughly,
Yeah.
I don't believe I would have got
Where did you
life
get an
sentence.
attorney?
Public defender's office.
Oh, man.
Let me ask you another question. I know in several of the federal cases we've talked to people. They were offered a deal if they would cooperate with the police in investigation and try to help them find other people that were involved in dealing and drugs and you know, personally I have mixed emotions about that. You know, I know there's the kind of the personal law, you don't rat on somebody else, but on the other hand, if you can keep little kids from getting drugs, I'm in for that too. So I think there's a lot of merit in putting pressure on people to get them to spill their guts. But were you offered any kind of a deal like that?
Yeah, but it wasn't like I was going to get out of jail free card or anything like that to that nature. So, I mean, you know, it was something you had to sleep on, think on, hard, because there's the other replication behind different things. And it's just like another life. You just
So
don't.
you ended up with a life sentence, and obviously you're alive and you're sitting here beside me. Now, how did you end up being here?
I was blessed. I was blessed through the system. Right, the president came along and changed some of the laws, Obama. That helped me. That gave me commuted my sentence down. Plus, what I do with my time, I wasn't involved in a whole lot of madness and craziness. So my records speak good and clear. Institutional record, that's what I'm talking about. And I just work, mind my business and work, follow the rules.
That's great.
And,
Now, I got a question for you. So we've got Christina Brandstad here, as I've said, one of the top attorneys. And Christina, you've been sitting here soaking all this up. Normally when you're in interviews, I know that you don't listen this long. Normally you're the one talking. So you've had a chance to listen. What is your take on just what you've heard so far?
Well, I'm going to start with a little bit of defense of the public defenders. There's a difference between court-appointed and public defenders, and court-appointed runs a really big span. You've got brand new attorneys who get on the court-appointed list, and they try to help that out, but you may have someone who's working out of their basement, doesn't have resources, doesn't have the training. The public defender's office are usually some very good attorneys, top attorneys, experienced trial attorneys, and they're criminal defense specialists, especially in the federal public defender's office. The bigger problem is just that there's no discretion in the laws, especially within the federal laws. And so you see people who really get sort of stuck with the laws increasing all these penalties for people who are dealing with addiction or people who are just in a bad circumstance. On the other hand, when you're talking about court-appointed attorneys, and sometimes that's what comes off the list, you can get anyone from, I'm going to name a couple names, Nick Sarcone, Monty Brown, me. We're all on the public defender's court-appointed list, and we do the same work. We just get paid a lot less for it. So I take some of those cases, and I just get paid less for those. But then you have other attorneys who don't have that same level of experience who are on that list, and that's where it becomes difficult. I do think that one of the things that needs to be stressed is the difference in resources available to defense attorneys as opposed to prosecutors. I can apply to have an investigator work, but I don't have a team of investigators. I can't send the police out to follow up on a lead that I have. I can beg and plead, and many cases recently will tell me they won't do it. We don't have the same training for the public defenders as the prosecutors, the same pay, the same facilities. So there are some disadvantages, but that's going to be for all of us. Court-appointed private pay or public defender's office really face some of those limitations. And the laws, especially with regard to drug cases, don't give discretion where they should and give discretion where they shouldn't sometimes. And there's no easy fix for that. People who want to make it very regimented are really taking away some of the opportunities for people who've worked hard. But when you put too much discretion, then you have imbalance, and that's the biggest complaint I hear.
Yeah, and in fact, Tony Dodd and I were talking earlier before this interview, and he had even shared the fact that his sentencing judge was Judge Pratt. He had all the respect for Judge Pratt, just because he knew that the judge told him that he couldn't do anything but sentence him to that amount at that time, which was a life sentence. He couldn't even get around it. And what did you say, Tony, when you got out? You went back to visit Judge Pratt?
I moved here and I went to the court building, the federal building, to see my PO. And I said, Judge Pratt reside there, and I said, I wanted to meet him. They called up, he told him to send me out. And he met me, sent me into his chambers, shook hands, and he told me I was unjustly sentenced. And he apologized. And I thought that was like, Hold on, let me get this straight. You mean to tell me that, so you went back to the federal courthouse, you went to Judge Pratt's chambers, and the marshals let you up to his office, and he told you personally that he was sorry for what he did and that you were sentenced unjustly? Sure he did. I'm just talking.
Wow, that's amazing.
It was heavy.
I don't think that's as unusual as you might think, that there are judges who at times feel very constrained. I've been in a situation where a prosecutor wanted to enforce the rules on, it's a Class B where it has mandatory prison for over 5 grams of methamphetamine. And the judge was really trying to get the prosecutor to come down off of that because there was no discretion. And that was a judge who really had his hands tied. And that's difficult when people see something like that. And we all know there are people who are in prison who have driving and drug-related charges but aren't dealers or aren't major dealers and aren't violent.
Well, we've been looking at 3 components of the court system: the attorneys, the judges, and we're going to get into the jury and ask you a little bit about that here in a minute. We hear horror stories about judges around the United States. I've never heard anything bad about our judges in Iowa. I think we've got some really great judges. I don't know how we get them because of the election system. You go down and mark your ballot, and most people don't know the judges at all. Some people say, I always vote against the one that's in there now. But I'm really proud of the judges and what I hear about them, and I think as a citizen of Iowa, we're very, very fortunate to have what we've got leading our court system. So, and thank you for the explanation or the difference between a court-appointed attorney and a public defender, because I think all of us are confused about that difference. I did look up on the internet and I saw that public defenders are actually part of, they're paid as a public defender and they're full-time people. Court appointed, then they're selected on an as-needed basis, if that's my understanding. Just get a lot less money.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to a commercial. After these messages, we're going to come back. We're going to talk more about this, but we are pressed for time for a commercial. So, 98.3 The Vibe, special edition, Image TV podcast. We've got Tony Dodd, Ken Silver, Christina Brandstad, and we're on the Image Show. We'll be back after these messages. All right. Thanks a lot,
Okay,
Tony.
well, thank you.
That was good.
Hey, take care.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, 98.3 The Vibe, Sunday morning special edition, Image TV podcast. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, satellite, we want to thank you for tuning in. We've got Christina Brandstad, the one and only master of disaster when it comes to defense attorneys. And then we have Ken Silver. And Ken is a very wise man, very seasoned in business, a good spiritual man, and just a great educator. Well, guys, I think I introduced you very well. Ken, say something smart. I know you're ready to.
You should have given me some advance notice if I known I was going to have to do something like that. I'd like to go ahead and talk about the public defenders, the court-appointed attorneys. Somewhere down at the courthouse where all the county attorneys get together, is there a scoreboard up on the wall of win-loss cases where they're graded by how many cases they've won and how many they've lost and so on?
There is really no record that I know of that's kept. I will tell you one thing. My favorite prosecuting attorney, Joe I.M.A.G.E, at one point when I was a prosecuting intern, I said something about winning a case, and Joe got very direct and very adamant with me, and he said, if you're a prosecutor and you call a conviction a win, then justice isn't your goal and you're doing it wrong. And if every prosecutor felt like that, and if every prosecutor saw it that way, it would be a very different system. But that was truly what he believed. And he said, your only goal ever is to put the evidence in front of the jury and get to truth. And he really believed that and really pushed that. Defense attorney, your goal is to get your client's case out there, and it is acquittal. It's a different situation. But I think that we all know what our record is. We all sort of know how we're doing, and we're aware of who does a good job in trial. But you're in a very different situation. One of my very good friends is a public defender. She's a great attorney. She's fantastic in trial. But she is probably going to have a different win-loss record than I am, because she gets a lot of people who maybe just want to test the system. People who are innocent think that they have to get a private attorney. And so a lot of times, and in fact, I've had people leave her and come to me, and I'm like, she's really a good attorney. And they're like, no, I don't want a public defender. I'm innocent this time. And
Speaking
it's different.
Speaking of win-loss records, what is your stat sheet look like? Because I know that not only are you one of the best, and by the way, I want to say thank you for a lot of the image guys that you've helped out, guys that have called for your help, guys that were innocent, guys that were even guilty, and you still just helped them along the way. For whatever reason it was, we appreciated that. But can you just tell us a little bit about your win-loss record for those who may not know?
I don't think I've ever talked about that, and I don't know that it's appropriate to, because that's a method of advertising that I don't think is appropriate, but I will tell you that my record's pretty good.
Okay.
So.
All right.
I'm glad you brought this up, because our impression is that the job of an attorney is to either convict or get the person off. It doesn't matter whether they are guilty or innocent. Their job is to prosecute that person that's charged, or else get that person to be innocent. And so I'm glad to hear what you're saying. One of the things that bothers us as we talk about, it could be private attorneys, but most of our experience is with either court-appointed or public defenders. The county attorney will charge you with some serious crime. For example, you and your girlfriend may be in the house and you get in a big argument and start screaming and hollering and throwing ashtrays and one thing and another, and she calls the police. The police come and take you to jail, and the county attorney charges you with burglary. A felon offense that's, got serious time connected with it. And then, sooner or later, you go to trial, and 5 minutes before you go into the courtroom, your attorney comes out in the hallway and says, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. We've got a deal. Do you want to go ahead and go to trial on this felony charge, or do you want to plead guilty to this other charge, a lesser charge, and maybe it's just a serious misdemeanor or something that carries less time?" So I guess my question is, if the lesser charge is justice, why did they try to nail you with the felony charge to start with?
Well, because it scares people into pleading at times. And so I'll tell you, in the past 2 years, I've probably 3 times had people who I allowed to plead to something that I don't think they were guilty of. And it's the worst thing that you go through as an attorney. But when it's someone who's charged with something that's got mandatory prison, mandatory sex offender registry, mandatory, and then they get offered something that takes away all that risk. There have been people who just feel like they have to take that charge and take that conviction. I have an article I give to my clients. It's called "Is America Pleading Away Their Freedoms?" But it's tough for someone when they're facing that level of risk to not just say, "Okay, I'll plead to something I didn't do." Now, I've been on the other side of it, where on the day of trial, just like you said, my client who was facing prison, sex offender registry, everything else, got offered a ticket for public urination. And he wasn't guilty of that either. And he went to trial. And, it took guts. It took absolute guts to have something that would just be a fine and go away. And he won, and it was great, and all was well. But,
what if he would have lost?
If he would have lost, it would have cost him his job, his school, his loans, his place that he lives, and he would have faced possible prison.
Sex offenders is pretty much a life sentence connected to your lifestyle. Well,
and it's understandable when someone's guilty, but if someone's not guilty,
right,
facing that's tough.
But one of the things is that shows you that we don't have that much confidence in the justice system when you're afraid to go to trial and when you're innocent. And that's a shame. I want to go ahead and...
and can I just address that?
Sure, you can do whatever you want.
I want to say one thing in defense of... People sometimes say, well, I know that a jury trial is a crapshoot, or I know that it's not. Juries make very good decisions. Citizens listen and care and make excellent decisions. And my experience has been that juries make good decisions if presented with good information.
Well, talk to me more about that, because I've got some concerns, and maybe other people do too. First of all, if I understand right, excuse me, juries are only selected from registered voters. Is that true?
No, I think that it's also from driving records. So it is a little skewed, because you're not going to get people who are neither drivers nor voters nor property owners. They're different places. But we still get a better cross-section than if we just relied on prosecutors and judges. And I love our prosecutors and judges, but I love our juries more.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to a quick commercial. We are into a great conversation right now. I encourage you not to change that dial. You're locked and loaded into reentry. You're locked and loaded into a lot of education right now. We've got Ken Silver And we've got the one and only Christine Brandstad, and we'll be back after these messages. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Image Show, 98.3 The Vibe, 9 o'clock in the morning, special edition, and Image TV podcast. Those of you joining us by YouTube, we want to encourage you to continue to keep signing up. Get those registrations in and sign up on YouTube. Subscribe. That's the word I'm looking for, right, Ken?
Right.
Okay. We're back into a deep conversation here with Ken Silver and Christine Brandstad.
Now that we're talking about juries, let's continue with that. What about the media? Is it possible to have an unbiased juror these days with all the media? I mean, who in the world doesn't watch internet, watch TV, and so on?
Well, so that's the most difficult thing is any of my jurors can go look up my client's Facebook pages, or if they have a criminal history, and that's what's frightening, is if someone has a criminal history, you just know the presumption is, well, they're probably guilty of something. Can look up all the background, and they can look up anything that's, if they're really savvy, anything that didn't get admitted. So I file a motion that says, here are the things I don't think the jury should hear. The prosecutor says, here are the things I don't think the jury should hear because they're not about this case. Well, they can look it up and read all of it if they're savvy.
Public information, huh?
Yeah, and they're told not to. Sometimes I worry that they will. But most of the time, information shakes out towards truth. And I do think truth tends to prevail.
You have confidence in the system that we've got now?
I have confidence in jury trials. I think that there's a reason. It's the only right that's in the Constitution twice. I think that they work. I think that our system is better than most, but there's certainly issues. There's a book called The New Jim Crow, and it really addresses this increasing rate of incarceration. And I think that is a problem, and I think that is the broken aspect of the system. We have too many people incarcerated, and we keep incarcerating more, and it's not working.
No, and it's expensive.
It is expensive. It's the only thing the Koch brothers and I agree on. We need less people incarcerated.
Well, and I don't know what the statistics are anymore, but at one time, 80% of the people incarcerated in Iowa were there because something related to drugs. Mm-hmm. So if we turn these prisons into hospitals or rehab centers, well, we could save ourselves a lot of money and a lot of trouble. One more question. When you talked about looking up the history, one of my pet peeves is this Iowa Courts Online. Mm-hmm. If you do something wrong and you're charged, it shows up on Iowa Courts Online, whether you were convicted or not. And employers look at that and take a look at it. They don't look at whether you're convicted or not. They just know that you were charged with this offense. And somehow I wish we could get that information off of there and have it just people that have been convicted of crimes, not charged.
Well, there's new legislation within the past year and a half. You can get dismissed charges expunged. You have to do an application to do it. I do tons of them. And it isn't very expensive, but you do have to pay for that. But that is brand new. And it's because we recognize that everyone who is charged with anything had this record out there. And still most people do. Most people don't know you can get that expunged, but that's new. And our Bar Association worked pretty hard to get that law passed so that we could do that.
A lot of people were precluded from employment because of that.
Mm-hmm. I got a question for you, Christine. So when you normally get a case from a guy, or a gal for that matter, a client, let's say, and they don't have the money. I know that oftentimes there's always a problem with people being able to afford an attorney because they're expensive.
But they're well worth it.
But they're well worth it, of course. Do you ever feel that that a person has received injustice because they didn't have the money to pay for a defense attorney and they had to go to the public defender?
I feel like people have had injustice because they've had a bad attorney. It isn't necessarily the public defender's office. I've certainly seen, I have told many people, and I mean this, you are so much better off with the public defender's office than a bargain basement attorney. You know, I've seen people say, well, I don't have enough money for you, but I'm going to hire this kid who's 2 minutes out of law school. That's usually not a better bet. But I have seen certainly times where I've looked at the representation someone's gotten and thought, I don't think we would have ended up there. And that's so difficult to see, and it's unfair. But yeah, there are times where I feel like lesser representation has led to injustice.
And being the niece of the former Terry Brandstad, former Governor Terry Brandstad.
Now unemployed, by the way.
Yeah.
How does that, do you think that that's helped your career? Obviously, it's helped your career. I won't even say that. But, I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, do you feel like you're kind of overshadowed by his position and you have to live up to a certain reputation, or has it been easier? What was that transition like?
Well, there's certainly questions. And often people assume that Terry got me my job, and I have to laugh at that. But he's part of the reason I became a lawyer. He was a lawyer early on. He didn't work as a lawyer very long because he was already a state representative before he graduated from law school, and he was always focused on his political career. But it was a big part of what we discussed. When I talked with him, once I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, he was one of the other 2 lawyers in my family, and so I talked to him about it a lot. And I would say it has certainly led to people remembering my name, which helps. It has also led to a lot of people assuming that my views are contrary to theirs, and I have to tell people I'm the, far left-wing liberal in my family, and I am, proudly. And I will say it has been sort of fun when I've had victories in court and when I've had verdicts. He's always the first one to call me because as a lawyer, he gets it, and he's been excited for me when we've had public victories.
You've had a lot of victories. You've had a lot of trials that you've won, and Des Moines knows about it. A lot of those people in that county jail, a lot of them know about it. A lot of the people in prison, a lot of the people that feel that they were given an unfair shake with their attorneys, a lot of them know about Christine Brandstad. And so I want to tell you to keep up the great work in doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure Ken Silvers would like to do that too. Isn't that right, Ken?
Well, I just appreciate you being on here tonight and taking your time and really helping us understand the whole system, because I come away with a lot different attitude or opinion about it than I had before you walked in the door. So thank you much, and I hope I can continue to see you outside of the courtroom and keep getting your advice. But thank you for coming.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I appreciate the work that the I.M.A.G.E program does.
All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you again for tuning in to the I.M.A.G.E show on 98.3 The Vibe, Sunday morning special edition in the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. For those of you, again, who are joining us, we just want to, again, tell you that we appreciate you sacrificing your morning and your time. And get out there and continue to subscribe. If you have any questions about what's going on, if you have any questions about the I.M.A.G.E program, if you have any questions about First Fridays as it's coming, September 25th, that's next Friday. It'll be at the John R. Grubb YMCA. We're looking for 5 men. We've got 3 already, 2 more. For those of you out there who may be going to church this morning, we want to tell you to have a great time. We want to tell you to continue to stay involved with your spiritual movement, whatever it takes to edify the spirit, whatever it takes to keep you in a moving positive position, moving forward. We want to encourage it. Okay, until next week, Ken Silver, Christine Brandstad, it's a wrap.